theMargins is a social media platform that aims to highlight issues on law and social justice. Please go to our website at lawatthemargins.com. There you can find great articles by activists, lawyers, and movement lawyers on various topics on labor and immigration. Most recently, Johan Fatimi, who is a clinical faculty member at the David Clark Law School, talks about a service learning experience in the Karnes Detention Center that's up and it's new. Today we have a really exciting conversation that we're going to have with Sean Basinski, who is the Executive Director and Founder of Street Vendors Project. We'll be joined later on in the program by a board member of the Street Vendors Project, Mohammed, Attia. And we're going to talk about issues of vending primarily in New York, but also a little bit of perspective around the world. I'll be bringing in my own writing on hawkers in Bangladesh, and we'll also be speaking with Sean around his experiences in Africa, and particularly Nigeria. So for those who are listening, if you have any questions you want to ask this guest, these programs are really for the participants. You can use a Q&A feature, which is on the left-hand side of the Google chat. You can also tweet with the hashtag #LowAtTheMargins any questions you may have for our guests. So with that, I'm going to start our program and welcoming Sean. Sean, thanks for coming onto the program, the Google chat. Let's begin by just getting some basic foundations. Why did you start Street Vendors Project? When did you start it? Give us a little bit of background on the program.
Wow, well, thank you, Chaumtoli, for this chance. You know, we've known each other for a long time, and we actually knew each other back then. So, but we never did a Google chat before, or so this is exciting. I mean, my story is I was a vendor myself for a short time here in New York. Back in, I'm almost afraid to say, back in '98. I was just a kid, you know. I was not a traditional vendor by any means. I was a kid from the suburbs. I was working on Wall Street, actually. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that now, but it's true. But I wanted to have my own business, and I thought that vending was one way to do that. And I didn't and so I did it for one summer. I sold Mexican food on Park Avenue. I had no idea what a world it was going to open my eyes to, and what issues. You know, issues that I'd still be working on now every day. Gosh, you know, more than 15 years later. You know, after that experience, I went to law school, and that also helped me to realize that I could use my experience and the new skills I had as a lawyer, and the privilege that I had coming from the place I do, to hopefully build power among this group of people who didn't have the advantages that I had, that's for sure, and were not organized really in any way whatsoever. So that was 14 years ago, almost 14 years ago that I started the project, and it's gone by fast, but now we're big, a lot bigger, and still fighting though.
So tell us a little bit about your membership, the demographics. You said you've gotten big in the 14 years. How many members? How do you sort of function organizationally?
Yeah, sure. Well, so we're based at this bigger place called the Urban Justice Center, which is kind of our home, but we are our own project. We have a staff of about 6. We have a couple of community organizers, a lawyer, a couple of development people, a bunch of interns now in the summertime. Our membership, so in New York, you've got about 20,000 street vendors selling food and merchandise. Incredibly diverse group of people. We do our meetings every month in 5 languages. So in addition to English, we do Spanish, we do Bangla, we do, what do? We do Arabic, we do Mandarin, sometimes we do Wolof and Nepali. I might be missing one there. So it's an incredibly diverse group of people. We also have U.S. military veterans who are granted a special license under New York state law. All across the city, these people are working out there every day in all weather, you know, serving us, you know, feeding us, and working so hard, so many long hours for little pay. We have about 2,000 members here. So out of the 20,000 vendors in New York, the 2,000 is a small percentage, but still a big number of people who are coming to meetings and actively a part of our struggle for more respect and more justice.
And of the 2,000 members, I mean, what kind of vending or work are they involved in? I mean, in New York City alone, there's food, there's different kinds of vending. Does your membership concentrate a particular type of business?
Very, very broad. Locationally, many people work in Manhattan. Of course, that's where you have the greatest concentration of workers and the greatest foot traffic. But also, we have a lot of people who work in Queens and Brooklyn, the Bronx, and those who don't work there live there almost invariably in the outer boroughs or uptown Manhattan, Washington Heights. It runs the gamut from coffee in the morning, coffee and bagels. We've all seen those, us New Yorkers, to hot dogs at lunchtime, and this is just food. We have a lot of people that sell Mexican food, and sometimes you have a big truck. Vendors will have a big fancy truck, and sometimes they'll just have like a tiny table or a push cart, like a shopping cart that costs $20 that they push from their home, or they might work out in front of their residence. And so mostly struggling people, but very diverse in terms of what they're selling, and that's just food. We have people that sell, umbrellas when it rains, sunglasses now in the summertime, clothing. We have homeless people that sell what they find in the garbage, be it books, magazines, used goods. Really an incredibly diverse group of people, and we're proud of that. We take great pride in bringing all these folks together under one banner.
With such a diversity, how are you able to come together around certain policy issues? Are there some policy issues that you're sort of working on now or that impact this community, since it has a sort of broad range from the unregulated sort of food in the cart to the more licensed, green carts?
Yes, it's not easy through organizing to bring people together around issues which might affect them differently depending on who they are. Although I will say that most vendors understand each other because they're all out there together and they sympathize with each other. Even those who may have done a little bit better, they can see in the vendor next to them, they can see themselves maybe 5 years before or 10 years ago. They can identify and sympathize and unite with those other vendors pretty well. But working out these differences is part of what we do in our meetings. It's not always easy. For example, right now we're fighting for more permits. I know we're going to talk about that. Some people already have permits. So why should they get involved with a campaign for more permits if they've already got one? Usually, though, you'll find is because they understand that they always didn't have one, and they feel more solidarity with the other vendors than they do, and they feel that it's a community, right, which we're trying to build. So even if maybe you're not to gain the most of anybody, if you're part of a community, that's what community means. That's what family means, that we do it for each other, not just for our own self-benefit necessarily. And so you know very well, Chaumtoli, that's what organizing is, and bringing people together around a shared mission. Different people are going to benefit to a greater or lesser degree.
So, tell us a little bit more about your current campaign. You mentioned this permit, asking for more permits.
That's right. So I know in a lot of places around the country and the world, vending is not even legal. You can't even go out there and get a permission to sell on the street. In New York, you can, but in the early 1980s, the city council put a limit on the number of licenses and permits that are available. So you can't. I mean, you can, but there's long waiting lists, and you might have to wait for 15 or 20 years to get a permit in your own name. So that leads to all kinds of problems, not just that people don't do it, but there's a black market, which is very complicated in permits, the illegal trade of them. And that's why you have a lot of people who sell without permits, because you can't get one and you can't wait 20 years for one. So we want the city to issue more permits, to issue permits that want to work, to people who want to work, to allow them to formalize their business. We say that's obviously good for the vendors, but it's also good for the city, because we want to know who's out there on the street. Food vendors, we think, should be required to take the health class that they do if they get a permit, but they otherwise might not. So it's lots of good kind of rational arguments for why the city should give permits to people that want them. And yet, there are powerful forces out there who don't want to see more vendors on the street, and they're afraid, they have a different vision for our city than we do, and they think oftentimes that they own the public spaces, but they don't, right? The public spaces are owned by the public, and so the government needs to determine, who gets to use them, and we think the people that should use them are the people that need them the most, the people who are out there, making a living for themselves, an honest living for themselves and their families. People who can't afford to have a store, otherwise they would, but they don't have the money to invest $1 million it takes to open a restaurant in New York City. They don't have that money. That's why they're out there on the street. I see Mohammed walking in. Come on in, Mohammed. Yeah, sit down.
Great.
Sean.
So I just want to thank you, Mohammed, for joining us. Mohammed Attia is actually the leadership board member of Street Vendors Project, and if I'm not mistaken, are you currently vending? Currently vendor? Okay. I'm just going to ask one question of Sean, and then I'm going to get a little bit background on your story. Sean, you talk about sort of business and making a living. As lawyers, there's businesses and there's workers. Street vendors, do you see them as workers, or do they see themselves as sort of businessmen and women? And does it make a difference, I guess, in terms of organizing? And I ask this because some of the arguments you were raising about permitting had a sort of business rationale to it, but some of the other reasons around making a living had a sort of workers' rights rationale to it. So it seems like you're kind of balancing these two identities, and I'm just wondering if you, in part of your philosophy as an organization, not you personally, but the Street Vendors Project, sort of see these as entrepreneurs you're helping, or workers you're helping, or maybe immigrants you're helping.
That's a great question, Chaumtoli. And actually, maybe we'll close the door here because I know it's a little. Sorry if it's a little noisy. So it's a great question, and you're right that vendors can be seen different ways, and many vendors are more like workers insofar as they don't really have an idea for their business. They're doing it because they just got to this country, for example, and they need to work. They may have limited English skills or other formal job sector skills, and so they know somebody who says, oh, go here and here's how you sell hot dogs, and I'll pay you almost nothing, but I'll pay you something every day to do it. Well, obviously that's more like a worker. To vendors who are self-employed people who, yes, they're working for themselves. They get to determine where and when and their own hours, and they make however much they make on a given day. They pay the expenses, so the sky's the limit. All the way up to somebody who's more like an entrepreneur, that they have a new idea for a new business and they have dreams of opening a restaurant one day. I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about working with vendors. But I think that sometimes academics and people in the labor movement or in other movements can get caught up in the classification of, are they workers, are they not? Vendors don't care what you call them. They're people that are out there that just want more respect and more power, and they want to be able to survive and do better for themselves and their families. So we don't get too hung up on it, although we can go either way with the lingo, and I can see it. We can see it from either side. We do call ourselves a worker center, and we do want to be included in that movement. We're working with other groups of restaurant workers and farm workers and taxi workers and domestic workers. This movement which has really gained so much steam in this country and around the world. So we're part of that. We see ourselves as part of that bigger movement, although we do recognize that vending can be more like a small business in some cases.
Great. We'll come back to sort of how sort of theories around law actually impact or don't even impact sort of organizing. I think you raised a really great point about sometimes we get caught up in a lot of these classifications, but on the ground, folks like Mohammed who are working, ultimately it's about dignity, respect, and making a living. So I want to bring you in. Thanks for joining us. I know that you're busy. So tell us your story. Yeah, how did you get into vending? How did you get into also being on the leadership committee of the Street Vendors Project? So give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Firstly, I started working as a vendor. I was working for somebody who has the cart and the permit. I just worked for him. Then I started like working, saving money, till I started my own business last year. So this is how it grew up with me in vending. And then I joined the organization, the Street Vendor Project, like 3 years ago. When I met some people who were doing outreach, they talked about it. They said it's an organization, we want to unite all the vendors, we need to ask for our rights, we need to have a voice in the city, we need to change the laws. A lot of the rules are like bothering us in many aspects, and just a lot of problems we're facing. And basically when it gets to vendors in the street, not a lot of people care about us. You already know that, like police, like agencies, the government, business improvements, all of these people, they don't really care. We're like just some people working the street to make a living, and that's it. But basically when I got here, I got so excited because it was the first time I see something like this, and I didn't really know that it's been there for a long time. I didn't really have a lot of connection with people around me, just few people I know in the country. I was so new, just go to work, go home, and that's it. So since I met these people doing outreach, they got me here, I got involved. I've been a member since 2012, I think. And then when I talked to everybody, I talked to Sean, to Matt, they told me about the leadership board last year. I got so excited, that's why I joined it.
Wait, and you said you were new to the country. What's your background? Where did you immigrate from? Excuse me?
I came from Egypt.
Egypt. And what kind of vending do you do? What kind of business are you involved?
Right now I do smoothie and juice.
Okay. So you joined the leadership when you were already successful. You didn't come to the business. You didn't come to the organization with any kind of legal problem or legal issue. Typically, Sean and I mentioned we know each other for many years of law and organizing work. Oftentimes, workers or individuals come and get involved because they're impacted. So your story is a bit different. What motivated you about the organization? Like, why, since you're already successful, were you motivated to help other vendors?
Okay, basically I didn't come here just to get personal help. Like the time I joined, I was just a vendor. I was still working for somebody, but I didn't really have any problems in my place. But I have a problem with the whole idea. Like maybe that's why I had now enough knowledge to know how to do my own business. Maybe if I didn't come here, I would just stay being working for somebody for many more years. So this is the thing. When I came here, I didn't have something specific that brought me here. No, I just came here because I was so excited about it. Because I found it's very useful, and we need to be more. We need to be more members over here. We need to grow the organization every day, and hopefully we're doing very good. Like now, every week we're receiving more members. So now people know that, yeah, it's very nice that you come when you have a problem out there, when you have something you need. Of course you have to come here. But basically, we need to have all the vendors to be over here, even if they don't have a problem, because that's going to give us more strength. And then we're going to do a lot more.
What are some of your sort of goals or vision as a leadership member of the leadership board? Where do you see the vendors project, or the vendor? Since you are a visionary, you're not coming here because, which is inspiring to me to hear actually. You're not coming there to get something from the organization, right? Which is one model. You're actually visioning a way in which you think vendors should be. So what's your vision?
It's my vision basically to just improve this job to everybody. It's like workers, business owners. If you work for somebody, if you have your own business, we need to receive more respect from everybody. Starting NYPD, the agencies, Department of Health, Department of Consumer Affairs, all the agencies we deal with, because we already not receiving any respect from them. This is number one. Number two is changing a lot of the rules. A lot of the rules make it very, very hard, excuse me, makes it very, very hard to just start working. Like, for example, the biggest problem we have now with the permits. Let's say I have a lot of money. I saved a lot of money. I worked a lot, saved money. Now I'm ready to be in business. Where is the permit? I can't get it. I have to go to black market. What if I can't find in the black market? I'm still working for somebody. And you already know, if I want to start like a big business, like a store or a restaurant or something like that, I need a really big capital that maybe I don't even have. But as a vendor, if I want to have my push cart, I can get it. I can go to the workshop, design it however I want, get ready. But when it gets to the permit, that's one big issue that you can't even move. And then what happens with some other vendors, they even go work without a permit. And that's a big problem too. They get arrested, they receive tickets. So we have vision of changing maybe the whole system about vending, because the whole system is still like that for over 30 years. No more permits, no new rules. Like whatever we deal with, the health department, the consumer affairs, they make it hard for us every year harder and harder. Sometimes they issue new rules and we just find out that, oh my God, that's a new rule, making you illegal to vend here. So imagine if someone is working in a place for like many years and just one day they said, no more, you cannot work here, you have to go home. So that's a big problem, and that's why we're here. So we really need to change a lot in the system.
And so I want to ask you, were you a vendor, or were you involved in vending in Egypt, or are you familiar with vending and hawking in Egypt before you came to the States? No.
No, not really.
I want to shift a little bit to Sean, just to get a global perspective. You did a Fulbright in Nigeria. Some of the issues that you're seeing in New York, are there similarities and differences from your work in Nigeria?
So many differences, Sham. So many differences, but so many more similarities, really. And in Lagos, where I was for 8 months, but even I got to go for a couple of weeks to Cairo, and we just saw last week in the news, you know, I get these notices about street vendor issues around the world. And in Cairo, once again, the city government's trying to remove the vendors from the downtown area. And there was a horrible video of the police taking a man's cart, sort of an old-fashioned wooden cart, and him really throwing himself on the onto the cart as if to keep them from dragging it off. And really, as a crowd gathered around, really heart-wrenching. But it's that same dynamic around the world. Governments, people in power, and remember, the vendors are always the poor people. They're always the immigrants to the city. They're those without power by definition, and the police are doing usually what they want, and often that means cleaning up or getting rid of the vendors for whatever pretense. Sometimes they'll say for health and safety, but it's never explained what that means, to put people out of work, how that helps anybody's health or safety. Sometimes they'll say congestion, and yet you know, every shopper that stops is in fact doing their business at the vendor, so it depends on what we see as congestion, right? We need to create cities that have room for vendors instead of kicking them off, and that's what I tried to do and to share with my, I did a report in my Fulbright. I tried to share that with the government, the Lagos state government, who had started a big push to eradicate all vending, just like they did in New York back in the 30s and 40s. It didn't work in New York. It didn't work in Lagos. There's still vendors there. They arrested a lot of people. They beat them up. They took all their stuff away from the most poor and disenfranchised people, and yet they're still there because vendors serve a purpose and because people need to work. So we hope that, I mean, I hope that New York realizes that, but no different from Lagos, no different from what's happened now in Cairo and cities around the world. And so it's, you know, it's good to know that there is some sort of a global movement for street vendors' rights around the world, but we need to work harder to connect these, you know, communities and to let the city governments know. It's almost always a city issue. And, you know, these people talk, the people from the city governments, the city planners, the mayors and the governors of the, you know, the bureaucrats of the different cities, they talk to each other. They should see, you know, some of the better models for how to let vendors be and see why vendors are good for cities instead of beating them, arresting them, and taking their stuff away and evicting them from the downtown cores. We see that so often.
Great. So we're going to slowly start to wind down. But so thank you a lot for sharing your experience in Lagos. Actually, coming back from Bangladesh, I've been working with with some hawkers union. They're actually called hawkers, not vendors, and saw firsthand, unfortunately, the municipal government putting a sledgehammer to a lot of the vendor stalls in the name of beautifying the city. And so I think that some of the issues that you mentioned in Lagos and some of the issues that Mohammed mentioned in terms of police, public sphere, whose city is it actually for, actually resonates throughout the world. So, so I think a lot of what you do in New York will be looked at, I think, across other countries. I want to encourage folks, if you have any questions of Mohammed or Sean, to ask them at this time so that we can pose it. You can also pose the questions at @theMargins hashtag. Just in a winding down, I want to get back to this issue about using law and organizing. And this question, Mohammed, you can answer in terms of working with lawyers. Us lawyers talk about a lot. And we say sometimes we get in the way of organizing because we get too much caught up in the law. You know, are we workers? Are you a business? What has been your experience? Because you're working in Urban Justice Center, which is primarily a legal organization, and Sean is trained as a lawyer. Interactions as an organizer working with lawyers. I mean, is law useful? Has it been ever a obstacle to your work?
Of course it is, of course. And I'm telling you, way before I got here, I didn't know anything about what's going on in the city. So I'm telling you, like, my experience was so limited in just working for somebody, getting paid, and that's it. But when I came here, I found out about everything. When I got here, I learned the law. I was educated to know what my rights is. I know everything I can do. I know how to start my business. I know how to talk to the police if I have any problem. I know my rights. I get all the books, all the documents that say in all the rules. So when I get to a place and I find any problem, I can even stand for myself. I can defend myself. Besides, if I have any problem or any issue, I'm going to find organizations supporting me, not just going out there by myself, don't know anything. And I found that in many of my friends, they just want to start business, and once they start, they fail because they don't know what to do. And of course, if they heard about the Street Vendor Project, if they came here, they joined here, they will find a lot of answers for all these questions. But of course, I've learned a lot since I came here. And every day I'm still learning.
So the law has been helpful for your organizing.
Sure, of course.
Has there been ever an instance where you thought that the law was an obstacle to you realizing your rights?
Sometimes when we found some of the rules are like so complicated to be understood. And this is our problem with the rules. Like a lot of the rules, I can say conflict with each other. Like maybe you find one rule in the book saying you can do so and so. And then an NYPD officer come and say the law says you cannot do so and so. So he writes you a ticket for that, or he asks you to move for that. Or he wants you to just shut your business and go. Like close your table, close your cart and go away. So when it gets to stuff like that, it sounds really complicated for us. It gave us a lot of hard time, and that's why we want to clarify everything with the rules, with the city. We need everything to be we need to be everything to be clear. So it doesn't give us a lot of hard time as vendors, and it doesn't really put us in troubles with the police and with everybody.
Right. Sean, did you want to add to that in terms of the ways in which law has been helpful to your organizing work, and then maybe ways in which it's been an obstacle?
Sure. I have some thoughts on that. Of course, we go out in the street, we talk to vendors about the organization. We say, oh, come to a meeting. And sometimes we'll say, oh, we have a lawyer, and right next door in the next office is our staff lawyer, Matt Shapiro. He's great. He's a really smart lawyer who knows all about the vending rules, but he's just one guy. And so imagine him rushing off to court, but we have 2,000 members. He can hardly do it on his own. There's real limitations there. If somebody gets arrested, if they do get beaten up, God forbid, well, we can go and make a case and maybe get that person some money, but that's very limited. What we really have to do is then put that back, or sometimes minimize the law with vendors. Yeah, you know, we have a lawyer. Sometimes he can help, but in some cases, but really, what we need is for you to help. You are much more powerful, you vendor, than Matt, our lawyer, and together we are many, many, many times more powerful than any lawyer or group of lawyers. And we together have the power to make changes that are going to impact everybody. And I think Mohammed did a good, you know, a part of that is through education. If every vendor was as confident as Mohammed is in the rules, was able to stand up to the police when the police came and harassed them, then we wouldn't need Matt. We would recognize that, yeah, lawyers are great in some limited cases, but we need to make much bigger change. And that's the model for doing it, really, through, you know, in our opinion, is as much through organizing as it is through the traditional practice of law.
Great. So we're going to slowly wrap up. I'm really thankful for the time that both of you have given. Part of Law at the Margins is to highlight the work that's happening on the ground, the way in which law and organizing is being used, and I think that the Street Vendors Project is a great example of that. So for those who are listening, how could they get involved in your work? How could non-vendors show support? Or maybe even vendors who are listening.
Well, if you're a vendor in New York City, come to our meeting next week. But assuming you're not, there's a lot of ways. I would suggest, we just made a great video about our campaign to get more permits. So you could go to our website, which is streetvendor.org. And look, and we have an email list. Of course, we've got Facebook and Twitter that you can keep, keep abreast of what we're doing, and let us know what you think, and let us know the vendors in your city or your country. Are they organized? How can we work with them? Those are some ways. We have. I mean, if you're in New York, there's lots of other ways to get involved, but go check out our website, I guess, is the starting point. And wherever you are around the world, go talk to your street vendor who's on the corner, right? Ask them what is their name. You may buy something from them every day, but you may not have ever had a chance to say, hey, my name is Sean. By the way, what is your name? I'd love to, so this is a way to get more business for vendors, but also to support them, not just with our dollars, but with our communications, our moral support, by learning more about what their lives are like. We're all busy every day, but stop, talk to your local vendor, and figure out like what's their day like.
Great, thank you. Mo, did you want to add anything in terms of? You seem like a visionary, so I think people are going to be inspired by wanting to help you realize your vision. What's one thing that people can do to help you as a vendor, leader, board member? What's one immediate ask?
Okay, so if one thing I really want to tell them to know about us as much as they can, as much as possible. Firstly, check in the website, know what we're going through. A lot of people don't really know what street vending is. They think just some people work in the street to make money and that's it. They don't know that we are very hard workers. We work in the street, no matter if it's cold, if it's raining, it's snowing. We go through a lot of struggle. So some people don't really know. We want them to know. We want them to have the passion to just appreciate what we're doing. And of course, we are a big part here of New York City, of the community. It's like something in the fabric of the street. Like we can't really get street vendors out of the city. It's impossible. We serve a lot of people, like thousands of people every day. So it's very great for everybody to know everything about street vendors, just to understand what we go through, to understand the struggle, to understand that we serve the community very well. And basically, yes, if you live out of New York, if you're in a different country, please make relationship with your friends, with everybody around you, with all the vendors in the streets. When it gets to Cairo and some places, I know it's illegal to be even vending in the street. That's what I heard about our country. Like, we see street vendors everywhere. Like, I used to see them, and we see them everywhere, but they are always illegal. Yes, police just come, beat them up, take everything, and leave. But these guys have families to support. They make a living out of this. They are not out there in the street for fun. They are not out there just watching people. No, they are out there to make a living. So go support them. Just talk to them. Ask them. Even if you have a minute, just spend a minute with a vendor every day. Then you will know everybody working around you. and then you can have us some experience. You will teach us some about your country, and then some from here, some from there, and then we can work all together. That's gonna be great.
Great, thank you so much. And so there's a Facebook page for today's chat. I'm posting the Street Vendor Project website. I'll also put a link to the video, Sean. If there are any other articles, I'm happy to post that there. So basically, get to know who you buy your coffee, your food, your vendor, get to know their name, their country. And I would add, as someone, I know you guys are modest, support worker centers and community-based organizations run on donations and support. So I want to encourage folks also, if you like the work that you're hearing about, to support community-based organizations like the Street Vendors Project. Thank you so much, and I want to thank Albert Garcia, who's behind the scenes and hosting this Google chat. Stay tuned for July 28th, our next chat with Cesar Vargas, who's an immigration rights activist. Thank you, and we're just signing off.
Thank you so much, Chaumtoli.
Thanks.